Hi everybody, hope you're all well. It's been a while since I last filmed a video. If you watch this channel for a while, then you'll probably know that I've recently had a baby, so I hadn't had lots of time in my hands. But today is a Sunday. My little one is currently 8 weeks old and she's with her dad right now, so I thought I should grab this opportunity to film a video and share with you all my giving birth and labor experience. You have to excuse me if this video sounds a little bit weird and feels a little bit awkward, but I have been out of practice and I haven't filmed in so long, as I explained, so it takes a while to get used to filming again. So where do I begin? I don't even know. So let's take first things first. I did give birth to a baby girl on the 18th of August 2018 at the Portland hospital, to a baby girl which we now call Fanny. So my due date was on the 22nd of August and I gave birth 4 days prior to that. And the reason of that is because I was diagnosed quite early in pregnancy, I would say, with gestational diabetes. So therefore my obstetrician didn't want me to pass my due date because the baby was already on the bigger side of the spectrum. So I was induced. My husband and I did enter the hospital on the 17th of August. That was on a Friday. And the whole process began. So we went there in the morning and we already knew our way around the hospital, so because we did have a hospital tour a couple of months before I gave birth, so we were quite familiar with the system and how the hospital works. So we went to the hospital on the 17th at 7 o'clock in the morning. That was the induction date that it was booked for us, and we initially went on the 7th floor of the Portland hospital, which is where the actual labor takes place. We were put into a room and they ran some basic tests. Basically they took, I think, my palms, and then my heartbeat and my temperature and things like that. So the doctor, I would say, arrived around 8 o'clock and we started the whole process with him giving me a gel. So this gel, it's supposed to start the whole process. So I think the purpose of this gel is to open up your cervix, and you may experience some early contractions. So I was given the gel, and then the doctor recommended that I should start walking and be quite active, so I didn't lie down at all after I had the gel given. So my husband, my mother and my father-in-law and myself, obviously, we went out for a walk, and I have to say, even within an hour of taking the gel, I started feeling some slight contractions. I would say I wasn't sure there were 100% contractions, as it was like they were more like mild cramps or mild period pains, something like that. So we went out, we had breakfast, and then we walked quite a bit, and then as the time went by, I started feeling a little bit more painful and a little bit more uncomfortable. So I want to say around 11:30, quarter to 12, my husband and I returned to the hospital. So the nurse said, it's really good that you feel something, because lots of women don't even feel anything and nothing really happens, so we have to give them another dose of the gel. But said it's good, keep being active. So my husband and I went out of the hospital again, and this time we went, just the two of us, to walk at the Regent's Park, because it's fairly close to where the hospital is. We did walk around the park for quite a while, and then I felt like, I was starting to have mild contractions. So around 12:30 to 1 o'clock, I would say it was more probably around 1 o'clock, I said to my husband, look, I'm not feeling very well, I don't feel comfortable walking, I feel like my water is gonna break, so why don't we go back to the hospital? So we went back to the hospital, and this time we decided it's best if we waited in our room. So that's what we did. We stayed in a room. I remember the midwife, I had a lovely midwife, by the way. She was so helpful. All the midwives at the Portland hospital were extremely polite and extremely helpful. Anyway, so we returned back to the hospital, and they did mention that my doctor was coming to check on me again around 3. So we just waited in the room. I remember I was on the bouncing ball, and I think I was watching some TV with my husband and things like that, and we were trying to kill some time. It wasn't really painful at this stage, I want to say. It was more uncomfortable than painful. They did place like 2 monitors on my belly with a like an elastic belt, and they were monitoring through that monitors the baby's heart. So the doctor came in around 3:30. He did check me, and he did mention that the gel had actually worked. So he said to me there's no need for him to give a second dose of the gel because I was already 4 centimeters dilated, and he was very pleased with the result. So what he did at this point is he decided to break my water at this point, because he said the moment will break your water, the progress will move faster. He did mention that my mild period cramps and mild contractions that I was feeling, they may escalate and become more intense. So he did break my water. I have to say I was really scared at this point, because I have heard a lot of people through YouTube videos mentioning that the actual breaking of your water could be very painful. So that's what happened. For the moment he broke my water, I have to say that that's when I actually start having contractions. Initially they were okay, they were like very strong period pains, but as the time went by they were becoming stronger and stronger, which is a good thing, that's what you want. And at this point I think I was experiencing contraction approximately 2 within 10 minutes, something like that. I did ask the midwife, I think she suggested it on her own, that I should think whether I want to have an epidural. I did ask her whether the contractions are going to become stronger than this. She said, unfortunately for you, yes. Anyway, so I said to the midwife, well, I'll think about it. So an hour and a half went by, the contractions were getting stronger, and I could definitely feel them, and I was starting to feel quite painful at this point. I talked with my husband and I said, what do you think I should do? Shall I have an epidural? Shall I not have an epidural? It was getting quite painful, I'm not gonna lie, so I decided to have an epidural. Anyway, long story short, I had something to eat, and then it was getting really painful and I was feeling really uncomfortable. So I said, okay, let's have the epidural done. Just so you know, as a rough idea, from the moment you decide to have the epidural until you have it is around 20 minutes. And then from the moment you have the epidural, it's actually done. For it to kick in, it does take another 20 minutes. So I didn't know that. So the anesthesiologist came in. She was a lovely lady. She made me feel so much at ease. She first did an injection at the back of my spine to anesthetize the area, so I couldn't feel the actual needle of the epidural because it was quite big. She did that, and then she did the epidural itself, and I could honestly feel like a cold liquid going through my spine. It was like the weirdest feeling. It was a walking epidural, so I could walk, go to the bathroom, everything, no problem. It's just that my legs were a little bit, not numb at this stage, but I would say they were a little bit heavier. But I could walk, I could go to the loo, I could walk out the corridor, I could do anything basically. At this point, once I had the epidural, they put me on the drip, and they start giving me something that is called oxytocin, which is basically a hormone that your body naturally produces when you're going into actual labor. But because I wasn't, it was an induced labor, they gave this hormone to me through the drip. And then I think at this point also the contractions started to become more regular and more, they were more close together. So I think at this point I was having around 3 every 10 minutes. So that's what happened. And then I think around 3.5 hours had passed and I started feeling the pain again. And it was getting quite strong again, and I think this time it was even stronger than before, obviously, because, you know, as the labor it was progressing, the contractions were getting stronger. So I asked to have a top-up. Every time you have a top-up on the epidural, even though it's a walking one, your legs become even heavier and heavier. So I had my first top-up, and then I think around this time my obstetrician did come again and he checked me again, and he said that I was now dilated around 6 centimeters, I think. So it had been a long day because obviously I was there since 7 o'clock in the morning. It was around 7 o'clock in the evening now, so we were already 12 hours there. And you know, everybody, my mother, my father-in-law, Constantina's aunt and uncle at this point had arrived at the hospital. Everybody was, you know, they were getting really excited and things. They were waiting outside, so, you know, people were coming and going through the room. And the doctor, he said, okay, I'll come and check you again around 2 o'clock in the morning. At this point, because the contractions were getting stronger and more intense, I was having a top-up of the epidural, I would say, every hour and a half to 2 hours. So the time went by and my obstetrician came again around 2:30 in the morning. Bear in mind that everyone was outside the room waiting for the baby to arrive. So the obstetrician examined me again, my doctor examined me again, and he said that I was now 6 centimeters dilated. So at this point, I'm not gonna lie, I did feel a little bit desperate because the contractions were getting really intense. I had to have top-ups of the epidural and I was getting exhausted. My doctor would say, okay, you know, it's going well, but it's not going as we want it to go. It's not progressing as fast as we would like. So I'm happy to wait, but I'll examine you again in the morning. But if at that point you're not dilated enough, then we may have to think about you having a cesarean, because, you know, we don't want to make it so difficult for you and the baby. So at this point we miraculously managed to convince everybody to go home, have a rest, and we did say as soon as we have any news we're gonna call you to come again in the hospital in the morning. So my dear husband had to sleep on a bunk bed that night, so he went downstairs on the first floor after, I know, something like 3-4 o'clock in the morning to have like a couple of hours of sleep. And I was just talking to the midwife, and the midwife was trying to convince me to sleep and rest, and you know, by that point I have to say my legs were very, very numb because I kept having top-ups, so I couldn't walk unassisted to the loo. I had to have someone help me because my feet were feeling quite wobbly and unstable. So the morning came, my doctor examined me again, and hooray, I was 9 centimeters dilated. I was so happy. So he said to me, well, give it another hour, so until you are fully dilated, and then we'll start pushing. So I was on cloud 9 at this point because I was really exhausted. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten since like 4 o'clock, which I had like 1 tuna sandwich. And I was, you know, I was like, yes, that is finally it. So we called everybody to come back to the hospital. I start pushing, I want to say around, must have been 8 o'clock. So the doctor came in, did another final examination, and he said, "You're fully dilated, we're ready to push." However, at this point, because I already had like, I don't even know, 7 or 8 top-ups, when he did come in the morning at 6 o'clock, he did mention, "You're not allowed to have another top-up until we start pushing, because we need you to be able to feel the contraction, so it would be easier for you to push." And I think I had my last top-up around 5-ish. So, and I started pushing around 8. So there was a big gap since my last top-up, and I could definitely start feeling the contractions again. I think on one side I could feel them more intensely than the other side, but yeah, I could definitely feel them now. But I didn't even care at this point. I was like, okay, let's get this baby out safely and let's, you know, just rest. So I started pushing. My husband was in the room. He was next to my head. But at this point, my temperature has started to rise, and the baby had an increased heartbeat. So I started pushing. I pushed and I pushed and I pushed again. And at some point, the doctor was like, "I can see the baby's head, I could see the baby's head, I could see the hair, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing." But unfortunately the baby's heart rate was increasing, so the doctor started getting a little bit worried. So he said, "Okay, you know what, I'm gonna use a ventouse and help get the baby out." So we did use the ventouse, and before I know it, our beautiful little baby Fanny was born. She was born at 8:46 in the morning, and she was just the most beautiful thing I ever laid my eyes on, to be fair. Yeah, that's it. That was what happened. I have to say, no matter how much pain you're experiencing, it's so much worth it the moment you see your baby and you hold your baby in your arms. It's just like a magical moment. It's so surreal, but at the same time magical. I cannot really explain it. So that was everything from me, guys. That was our story. That was what happened. Anyway, I don't want to ramble too much because this video is already too long. I don't know when I will be able to film again, and even if I will manage to edit this video at some point. But hopefully you'll see me again very soon. That is everything from me, you guys. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you all soon. Bye, you guys.